For this episode of Classic Cinema Corner, I'm going way back, about as far back as I can go. Perhaps the two most notable directors of the earliest days of cinema are the Lumiere brothers and Georges Méliès. Most commonly cited among their works are Arrival of a Train at a Station and A Trip to the Moon. Both seem to question what exactly is the purpose of film. This question might not seem relevant 100 years in, but I'd say we're still asking it. After all, the value of science fiction and fantasy are still questioned to this day. What's important to understand is that up until the invention of film and the camera, most art was striving towards realism. But with cameras, we finally reached the point where we could just capture reality as it is, or at least what we could accept. Statues and paintings only offered approximations, while books were limited to words. Cameras could actually capture reality. And perhaps most importantly, they could do so without the interference of an artist. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a wide variance to the level of skill of photographers, but even the worst photographer can at least capture the image of a human. That's what the device does. For those seeking realism, the camera was the final evolution. The work of the Lumiere brothers became a showcase for this. Their films are purely documents. Trains arriving at stations, workers leaving their factory. They're all images of everyday life. A lot of directors followed in their footsteps. Travel was popular. They would take a new train in a new city or a boat downriver. It seemed that audiences of the time simply wanted to see the world as is. And in the earliest days, that's all there really was. But I think all of us would agree, isn't that kind of boring? And I think most people back then also agreed. After all someone has to do is sit a camera on the edge of a riverboat. Is there really any artistry involved? Art is, in part, effective due to the difference between reality and the artist's view of reality. Everyone has their own little touch when telling a story. For generations we chased realism, only to realize that realism was kind of boring. I believe this is why A Trip to the Moon is often the most cited film from this era, over a decade before The Birth of a Nation. With A Trip to the Moon and his other early works, Méliès seemed to be questioning the inherent truth of cinema. Where others were happy to simply let the camera roll, he was actively trying to break the image apart. His earliest works were simple trick films, experiments in superimposition. Where film could capture reality, editing allowed him to splice together an illusion based in that reality. One could argue that we could have reached that point without him, but he still deserves credit for being the first. A Trip to the Moon's purpose seems almost lost in our time. Its set pieces are obviously fake, but what's wrong is to assume that he was trying to trick us. Instead, A Trip to the Moon seems to be drawing attention to its lies. It wants us to be aware of the fact that the camera can lie. Where other forms of art have to work towards realism, film has to work away from realism. A Trip to the Moon is a great testament to the fact that great art can be found in many different forms. Where some find value in trying to capture the world as it is, there's also greatness in trying to capture new ones. Though perhaps crude now, the film's surface-level rejection of realism is a bold statement. Film did and does not have to be limited by its function. The apparent promise of reality actually allowed the easier creation of false realities. To put it simply, Méliès proved that movies could be magical.